There's one thing that I want you to keep an eye on, with these critiques, and that I want you to keep an eye on in your own campaigns. And what I'm talking about is making sure that you stay on course when you are delivering your message, meaning making sure that you stay focused on the payoff for the prospect, on why they should care, on what is it that's going to lead them closer and closer to buying, versus you saying something or adding in a line or a paragraph or a sentence that really doesn't further the sale. You know, and what I mean by that, really, if we look at this from a big picture perspective, is really knowing why everything is in your campaign, right? Like oftentimes it's one of those weird things that I've really started to notice more and more. And that is that for some reason today, folks, entrepreneurs, marketers, they feel like they need to say more. They feel like they need to write more copy. They feel like they need to elaborate more. And unfortunately, what often ends up happening is they end up talking about things that are really kind of irrelevant to the sale. Or really what I should say is that they start to talk about things that the prospect doesn't really care about. The prospect isn't using to make their decision, right? It's either not about the prospect, or it's, you know, like it has nothing to do with the prospect. It has nothing to do with the benefit of the product or service or unique mechanism. It's not building credibility. It's not building authority. It's not establishing any kind of urgency or scarcity. Like it's just extra information. And so you always have to ask yourself, especially when you are kind of, if you're in the stage where you're just ramping up your copy skills, you feel like you're really working on getting better at delivering your marketing messages, you really want to go line by line, paragraph by paragraph, and just constantly ask yourself, like, why am I saying this? Why is this in here? And really looking at it through the lens of what role is this serving? Strategically, what is this doing in the copy? Meaning, like, if I took this out of the copy, would it make a difference? Would it not? Would the copy then no longer create authority? Would the copy no longer create credibility? Would the copy no longer establish urgency? Would the copy no longer build enough value, build enough intrigue? Would the copy not talk enough about the benefits, the payoff, right? Like, and so you just want to make sure that what you are saying, what you are showing, what you're demonstrating is there for a reason. And you really just want to make sure that that's as tight as possible. You know, oftentimes, and you've heard me say this before, when in doubt, trim. I know that sounds, you know, like that sounds, in some cases, it can sound counterintuitive, because I do want you to share every benefit. I do want you to share every promise, everything of value that your prospect could want to know, that your prospect could find valuable, that your prospect could use to make a buying decision. Everything that could want your prospect to want your product more, I want you to share. But everything else that doesn't fall under that, that's not moving the prospect closer to buying, get rid of. Keep it tight. And so keep that in mind as we go through these different submissions. You know, you want to make sure that you're not getting creative for creative's sake, that you're not copy for copy's sake, that you're not asking questions in your copy because you feel like you should be asking questions, or this is a good place to put a question because I don't know what else to say. Like you want, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how to do this, or kind of where to do this, but you want your copy to feel unrelenting, meaning where it is just like it's benefit, exciting point, authority, credibility, urgency on top of another on top of another, where the more they read, the more they want it. The more they consume, the more they want it. The more they see, the more they want it, where there's no slack in the line, so to speak. You're never letting them off the hook. You're never easing up. You're just piling on reason after reason after reason after reason for them to buy. And anything that lets that off, anything that could potentially be bored or cause boredom for the prospect, we get rid of. Anything that can cause confusion, we get rid of. Anything that requires them to start really diving in and processing things logically, like where they're like, you know, they're using that kind of scientific portion of their brain, right? We get rid of. And so with that being said, just now kind of keep that in the, you know, keep that in the forefront as we go through this. So let's take a look at this first submission. And let me just bring this up. Let me just keep this over here. And as you guys know, if you've got anything to share, you can go ahead and just pop it right into the chat window. And if you've got any questions, pop that into the question section. And so this is obviously from Thomas from Better Trader Academy, and he just really said he'd like to ask for a review of the offer page. This comes after the combination screening webinar. So there are two things that, well, there are two things that I want to say here. First, we're going to dive in just a second, and we're going to look at this page, and I'm going to point out just a couple of things to you, because I really feel, Thomas, that this page is pretty darn well done. Like, this page is good enough where I would tell you that even without the little tweaks that I'm going to share with you, I would certainly test this. But the first thing that I want to share is that when you are doing a webinar, so let's say you go from registration page, like the registration page that we worked on, where you're driving folks to register for the webinar. Then obviously once they register for the webinar, you know, you have a follow-up sequence, maybe an intensification sequence to get them onto the webinar. Like, you really drive attendance, they get on the webinar, then you kick the webinar off, you give them a reason to stay around, you kind of tease them with what they're going to learn, the benefits, the value of the webinar, you bring them through your EBM content on the webinar, and then in the end, you present your offer. Well, when any of you do that, here is what I highly recommend for you: that you do not bring them from the webinar to a sales page, that you bring them from the webinar to an order form. In other words, the way that I want you to look at it is, whatever selling it is that you're going to ultimately do after your marketing, you're going to do on the webinar. Right? And so I want you to think of it as the webinar is what's delivering the marketing and sales message. The webinar is what is building the desire for your product and then is making them an offer for your product. And the call to action is really sending them to sign up. It's sending them to an order form. The way that I really want you to kind of think of this is, imagine if you went into a car dealership to buy a new vehicle. Let's say you were in the market for a Range Rover, and the salesperson took you out onto the lot. You picked out the Range Rover that you like. You took it for a test drive. You were really, you know, you were blown away by it. He sat down with you. He went through the cost and you know, the price and all that. And then he asked you if you were ready to buy it today. And you said yes. Well, he's not going to give you a brochure to review at that point of all the features and benefits. He's not going to go back into sales mode. He's not going to start to pitch you again on why you want this. He's going to take out the paperwork and he's going to have you sign it. And so with a webinar, you bring people to an order form. You don't bring them from a webinar you don't bring them from a webinar to a sales page. You bring them from a webinar where you do the marketing, you present the offer, you give the call to action. The call to action is to call it, you know, sign up in for lack of better phrasing, and then you send them to an order form, not a sales page. So now with that context, let's take a look at this page. And you know, you can see the thinking, you know, like Thomas, I can see the thinking in what it is that you've done here from the work that we've done on the registration page, right? Keeping it focused on what is the promise, like what is the payoff. Start creating profitable breakout strategies in 14 days or less without spending more than 35 minutes a day, following a simple 5-step program that has already helped hundreds of breakout traders in 34 countries, right? So some specificity here: 14 days, 35 minutes, 34 countries, 5-step. I dig it. And so the only thing that I would tweak here And most of what it is that I'm going to share with you, Thomas, most of what it is that I'm going to point out, really, I would say that most of what it is that I'm going to point out on today's submissions are really just tweaks. They're not necessarily make or break changes. But over here, this is one of those little subtle points that I want you to see that all of you will benefit from. You see where it says, so start creating profitable breakout strategies, blah, 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 following a 5-step program that has already helped hundreds of breakout traders in 34 countries. So the way that I would tweak this is I would take this from what is past helped to present. I would make this following a simple 5-step program helping hundreds of breakout traders in 34 countries. So you don't even need the word that. Most of the time, I'll tell you, just for what it's worth in copy, most of the time you can get rid of the word that. If you look at most of my even emails, especially, like you'll see that when in doubt, I take the word that out because you don't need it. Following a simple 5-step program, and often if I need a word in here, I'll use which. Right? W-H-I-C-H, which has already helped hundreds of breakout traders in 34 countries. But in this example, I would make it present tense because I never want our prospects to think that this is something that worked in the past, right? Like anytime you say something like, like if you went with an extreme example and we said, this helped me, this helped me make money. This helped me become a decamillionaire 6 years ago. Well, that opens up a new objection, a potential objection that I didn't necessarily have to open up or create. And that is, well, will this still work today? Is it dated? Is this no longer effective? It sounds old, right? All of that. And so we typically try to bring it into present tense, right? And so this is start creating, strategies in 14 days or less, following a simple 5-step program, already helping hundreds of breakout traders in 34 countries, right? And so it helping, meaning that it's working now. And so rather than, right, following a 5-step program, let's say, which generated millions for average traders, it would be generating millions for average traders. Even if you were talking about, tomatoes, right? Rather than, it's grown monster tomatoes, it's growing monster tomatoes for average gardeners. And so we bring it into the present tense. And so, but I like it. You got credibility up at the top. And so let's take a look at this. So breakout trading is one of the most popular styles of trading amongst traders. So one of the things that I would say here is, and again, subtle little tweaks, not make or breaks. This is me telling you what my thinking, what I would do, right? If we were partners, my money was on the line. So right. So we obviously are talking to people that are interested in these breakout, these breakout strategies, right? And so always we want folks to associate in this case, we want folks to continue to associate breakout trading with success, with wealth. And so rather than just say breakout trading is one of the most popular styles of trading amongst traders, which, by the way, I just don't like, and this is a pet peeve in terms of writing. I don't like how we've got trading, traders. It just feels very kind of redundant. We might want to say breakout strategies are one of our extremely popular or are wildly popular, wildly used amongst, and then I would certainly describe the type of trader that they want to be, right? Wealthy traders, right? So even if we were going to leave this as is, I would say breakout trading is one of the most popular styles of trading amongst wealthy traders, right? When it's done properly, it can be incredibly profitable. And over here, this is, again, I don't, for to help you guys long term. Remember, I'm a big believer in, just as a side note, as most of you, if not all of you, understand at this point, I'm a big believer in teaching you how to fish. Not only giving you the fish, but teaching you how to fish, teaching you how to think, teaching you what to look for, teaching you what to look at, teaching you why to look at it a certain way so that you develop these skills that you'll be able to use for life. This is an example, right? Incredibly profitable. When it's done properly, it can be incredibly profitable. Well, over here is where I would think, right, when during the editing phase, I would be thinking about, is there a verb structure that we could use in here that would make this more action-oriented, more dimensionalized, rather than use this, right, incredibly profitable, like this, you know, adjective, and now, right, like, in other words, done properly, right, it overwhelms, I'm just doing something off the cuff, right? Done properly, you know, it can overwhelm you with more profitable trades than you can imagine, or it can create a surge of profits in your trading account, right? Like, in other words, surge, it can stimulate profits rather than just, right, it can be incredibly profitable. And so verb driven, and, you know, look, we've got when it's, very plain languaging. And so not make or break, but stuff that I would look at.